Hi everyone, this is Mitch from Diverse Multiverse, and today I'm going to be doing probably my first roller coaster themed video. Oh, if you count the other one comparing the animated movies to some of the other B&Ms that are out there. I am ranking my personal preference on all of the B&M inverts in the world. When Satisfactory's tier 1, Exceptional goes up to tier 5. The higher the tier, the better they are. So these are just my opinions, and if anybody has a different opinion, I'd love for you to share it in the comments below. So we're gonna be starting things off with Flight Deck at Canada's Wonder. Excuse me. No way. So, we are going to be starting things off with Flight Deck at California's Great America. This was previously known as Top Gun with black paint instead of red and white. So, this thing is pretty small, and it's also one of the older inverts out there. It is also really small. It's over a nice, really cool lake, and it's really intense, even though it packs in such a small package. So, for its relatively short size and for its relatively shortness, but tying in for its really cool setting over the lake, and for how much it's held up, I'm not going to put it in tier 1, except I'm going to put it in tier 2, in the great category, because Flight Deck is worthy of that. Next up, from a very old B&M invert to a brand new B&M invert, we have Monster at We have Monster at Gronalund. There we go. So, Monster is actually the brand new for 2021 B&M invert. Is it 2020? 2020. It's 2021. Gotcha. Okay. So this brand new for 2021 B&M invert was basically built at Gronalund, and it's been almost 3 years in the making, I believe. This thing looks really, really smooth. I love how they built it with a relatively long ride in such a small space. That's what Gronalund does beautifully, as well as Phantasialand as well. So, Monster at, let me think for a second, actually. So, for its extreme smoothness and its theming and how new it is and everything, I'm gonna put Monster at Gronalund in tier 4, the spectacular tier. Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, tier 4. Alpinegeist at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. This one is the tallest out of all of the 21 B&M inverts in the world, and it still holds that record today. So, Alpinegeist, this gargantuan monster, almost stretches to a hypercoaster level. So, other than that, there's not really much positive things to say about this. I've overheard that it's gotten pretty rough. Some of the things are really snappy in a pretty painful way. And it really drags after the mid-course brake run. So for Alpinegeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, I'm putting in the satisfactory tier. By the way, satisfactory means it's still good, it just could have been done better. Okay, so our next two I'm actually going to be grouping together because they're both clones. So these are Monster at Monster at Walligator Park and Raptor at Cedar Point. I have only ridden Raptor, so I'm going to base Monster off of what I've experienced from Raptor. Raptor is really, really fun, very intense, and it's another one of those things on a larger scale. So, what I think So yeah, Raptor is really, really fast, really, really fun. It comes in a short package. Not really though, but you get what I'm saying. So Raptor and Monster will go in the excellent tier because they both have really, really fun layouts. Though Monster at Walligator Park doesn't have mid-course brake runs, so you'd think I'd put it in the spectacular tier, but no. They're both basically the same ride, still same type of feel, whether they're brakes or not. So, Batman the Ride. Basically every single clone out there. I have only ridden one of these though, and that is the one at Six Flags Great Adventure, and I rode that in the back row. So, what I think, it's another one of, it's kind of like Flight Deck in some ways, but it executes it a little bit better. It's definitely the best clone ride out there, so I think Batman will also go in the excellent tier. Yep. Montu at Busch Gardens, Tampa. Widely considered one of the greatest B&M inverts to ever exist on this planet. And I could definitely agree with some of you, because this thing is gargantuan, intense, very, very fun, all at the same time. You dive through trenches, you can dive underground, it's really, really, really fast, really, really tall, and it's really smooth for how much it's held up. So I'm going to be putting Montu also in the spectacular tier, because I do think that there are better inverts out there than Montu, but it's definitely one of the best ever created. So, Catoon at Mirabilandia. This ride is basically very similar to not Montu. This ride is very similar to Raptor and Monster, or the monster that's the clone of Raptor. Anyway, Catoon executes it more superbly, although they're basically the same types of elements and everything. I've heard it's much more intense, and it's a lot bigger, and you really feel the wind through the hair on that overbank turn in between the 0G roll and the Cobra roll. It's a lot more drawn out than Raptor, while it's still being more intense and everything. So, with that, I'm going to be putting Catoon at Mirabilandia in the spectacular tier. Now we have Nemesis Inferno at Thorpe Park. Nemesis Inferno is basically supposed to be the successor of Nemesis at Alton Towers, which we'll get to later. But Nemesis Inferno is really, really short. While it is kind of intense, it's the only invert out there with interlocking corkscrews, but that doesn't really make much up for the really short layout while still being small and kind of intense. I've heard it's not super smooth. I've heard it's pretty rattly at times, but yeah. So Nemesis Inferno will go into the great tier. Tier 2. Now Banshee at Kings Island. A lot of people, just like Montu, a lot of people consider this the greatest invert to ever exist as well, but I totally disagree. While I still think it's a wonderful ride, it's definitely fast, very long. It's definitely the fastest out of all of the inverts in here, and it's definitely the longest one as well. And it's because it's a lot more drawn out than the other ones on here. So, but it's still really intense. But why do I hate it so much? Well, I'll tell you the number one reason why this would have been in the spectacular excellent tier, but why I'm putting it in the satisfactory tier are these two main reasons alone. The vest restraints, the second generation vest restraints that were a failed project from the start, and I hated those things ever since the beginning, and the rattle it's been having. at some rows, it's gotten pretty bad. So that's why I prefer to ride this in the front or in the back, because in the kind of the middle rows, it gets really bad. But it's still really fun nonetheless, and I don't really care for it that much. I don't really care for its flaws. So yeah. Osiris at Park Astor, or is it Osiris? I grew up saying Osiris. Anyway, Osiris at Park Asterix. This thing is basically Montu point 2, but except it's a bit smaller, but it has much better theming. You also dive under underground tunnels while doing it in a really, really cool way. There's audio in the queue. There's really, really picturesque scenery effects. Like when you start, there's like a blinking eye as you roll out of the station. There's a really cool fountain outside the front. It's really, really smooth, and there are some other things that I like about it as well. I could go on about it more, but I'm just gonna say Osiris goes into the excellent tier because of its smoothness, its fast-paced action, that kind of thing. Patriot at Worlds of Fun. This thing is probably one of the most beautiful inverts I've ever seen. Well, not in a theming kind of way, but paint job kind of way, because it's the more unique one out of all of the other ones. So, for that, actually, first off, Patriot is kind of rough, or so I've heard. Or maybe not, I don't know. But Patriot is pretty, well, how can I explain it? It's kind of drawn out, but not really. In kind of a way it's not super intense, like the inversions try to be so smooth, it doesn't really go into the intensity category. And the layout is fun, I guess. I'd say for some people the layout can definitely be up towards the fun rather than the intense kind of category. And that's not really my cup of tea, but I do enjoy it sometimes. So for that, I'm going to be putting Patriot at Worlds of Fun in the satisfactory category. Great Bear at Hershey Park. Now, from what I've heard, this is definitely the weirdest out of the B&M inverts on this list. So, for that being unique and also really, really fun. So, Great Bear, I've heard, was also the hardest to construct since the supports couldn't go into any of the water. So they had to build it in in a certain way that it would also support the ride structure while not interacting with the river. And so, through that, a lot of determination went through Great Bear. It has really fun elements, like, it is relatively smooth, not super smooth, but I've heard it's got a little bit of a rattle. But it is pretty intense, and there are some weird straight sections, but though I can't really blame them because of the laws of building over the lake. I don't know, I didn't feel like that there could have been much more done with Great Bear, other than just really fast elements and stuff, and that kind of thing. Anyway, so Great Bear goes into the great category. Great Bear great goes into anyway, okay, Nemesis at Alton Towers. A lot of people consider this to be the greatest B&M invert to ever exist, along with Montu and Banshee. Though, for me, personally, I think this is probably one of the greatest ones to ever exist as well. So, Nemesis at Alton Towers is extremely intense, or so I've heard. I've never actually ridden it. But it's extremely intense while still... So, like Great Bear, Nemesis also had some rules to follow as well. Alton Towers couldn't build above the tree line, so what they had to do was do some terrain work and build Nemesis under the tree line so that it would interact with the terrain, dive under trenches and everything. And so, yeah. It's super intense. I've heard it's not very smooth, but that's going to change soon after its retrack. So once it gets retracked, it will probably still stay the same intensity as last time, while still being super smooth and possibly one of the greatest ride experiences to ever have on a B&M invert, along with some of its new theming as well. So after that consideration, Nemesis gets our very first exceptional ranking. Nemesis at Alton Towers goes into the exceptional tier, our very first one. So, Dragon Challenge at Universal Studios Orlando Resort, Islands of Adventure. I actually had the pleasure of riding both of these before they closed, but not while they were dueling. So, what can I say about Chinese Fireball and Hungarian Horntail? While I can say the Chinese Fireball was more enjoyable, I do think that the Hungarian Horntail has better elements to it. They are both pretty drawn out sometimes. They are pretty weird sometimes as well. But that also goes to show that they gotta interact with each other as much as possible. So not riding it with the dueling aspect felt really weird. I'm pretty sure they'd rank higher while I was still riding it while it was dueling, but I wasn't, so. For that being really weird rides, I'm gonna say both Dragon Challenges go into the great category. Just like that. I'll think about it for a minute. But for now, they stay in the great tier. Talon at Dorney Park. This thing is one of the most, along with Patriot, this thing has a really, really, really beautiful color scheme. Along with that being really, really intense, very, very smooth, and while it also being a long ride as well. It doesn't have a mid-course brake run, which is kind of sad because it doesn't operate with 3 trains. But that doesn't take the fun away from it, though. It's still extremely intense, very, very fun, while still being fun as well. So for that, Talon goes into the spectacular tier. So next up, I have Silver Bullet at Knott's Berry Farm. This one is definitely the more drawn out B&M inverts of the lists. But I never really grew super fond of Silver Bullet. I didn't really like it all that much, so I'm just gonna say Silver Bullet, you are really smooth. You do have some fun elements and everything, but, well, yeah. You didn't really prove too much, so I'm gonna put you in the satisfactory category. You can kill me in the comments if you want, because I know that this ride has its fans. Afterburn at Carowinds. What can I say about this ride except pure perfection? I have ridden this before, and it actually stands as my favorite invert of all time. This thing was actually not really tall, but it's still really fast because of the way the drop is designed. So in that way, Afterburn has possibly the best pacing out of any of the inverts I have ever ridden. While it's super, super intense, very, very fun, really smooth, and has some of the fastest inverts I have ever experienced on a B&M invert. And with that, Afterburn goes into the exceptional category. I could literally talk about it so much, but nah. I'm just gonna let you say, it's my favorite B&M invert of all time, and it more than deserves to be in the exceptional spot. Black Mamba at Fantasialand. Out of all of the B&M inverts, this one probably has the best theming. Sorry, Osiris, but it goes to Black Mamba, no question. Black Mamba wraps itself around the park in some of the walkways, while it still has some really, really exceptional theming, like deep trenches, very cool tunnels, and exceptional stuff otherwise. So I'm going to be putting Black Mamba in the excellent category. Yrenes at Parque España in Japan. It's kind of a weird thing. It's a Spanish park in Japan. Parque España. So, yep, Yrenes. What else can I say about this ride except this ride is also pure perfection. I have yet to ride it, since I can't really go to Japan quite yet because I don't know how to. So, without that, I'm just gonna say Yrenes. Before Banshee opened, it was the longest and fastest B&M invert to ever exist. I could be wrong about that, though. Maybe. But I definitely know it was the longest. I'm not so sure about the fastest. But, or wait, no. I think Alpinegeist was the fastest. No, I'll think about that later. Anyway, Yrenes. Intense, super fast, very loopy, very, very, very intense. It's got a great layout. It's basically a mix of almost all of the other B&M inverts into one. It's got the start of Batman, and then it's got a Cobra roll, and then it's got its own signature elements after that. Which makes it its very own unique flavor, and possibly one of the greatest inverts to exist. So that's why I'm going to put Yrenes in the exceptional category. And so finally, our last invert that we have is Faithen at Jeonju World. Possibly one of the least famed B&M inverts ever known. Although I am going to say a few things. This thing does kind of seem like Silver Bullet. Some ineffective helixes and other stuff that's kind of like that. So I'm not going to talk too much about Faithen, since it kind of sums up Silver Bullet, but I am going to place it above Silver Bullet because of its theming and its relative smoothness, or so that I've heard. So I'm going to put Faithen at Jeonju World in the great category. So, here's the entire tier list. Do you agree with some of my picks? Do you think that I should rearrange a few things? Let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about where you would place these B&M inverts. And so, yeah. See you all next time. Bye-bye!